Asterisk, 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 a crippled slave shuffles through the most powerful corridors in Rome. Emperors pause their conversations to listen when he speaks. Senators travel thousands of miles just to hear him teach. This is a man who owns nothing, who was beaten so brutally his leg never healed properly, who couldn't even buy his own freedom. Yet his words would outlive every emperor, every general, every senator who ever looked down on him. But first, let me tell you why his story matters more today than ever. Asterisk, 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 picture Rome at its absolute peak. The year is 60 AD. The empire stretches from Britain to Babylon. Slaves pour in from every conquered territory, human cargo traded like cattle in the forums of the capital. Among them, a young Greek boy named Epictetus. His name literally means acquired one, not even worthy of a real name. He's property, bought by Epictetus, a freedman who serves in Emperor Nero's court. And here's where most people get the story wrong. Epictetus wasn't born a slave. He was born free in Phrygia, in what we now call Turkey. Captured, enslaved, dragged to Rome in chains. Imagine that psychological devastation. You knew freedom, then lost everything. But here's the twist that changes everything. His master, Epictetus, was no ordinary Roman. This man was obsessed with philosophy. The villa became an unofficial school. While other slaves scrubbed floors and served wine, Epictetus found himself listening to the greatest Stoic teachers of the age. And then came the brutality that would define his life. Whether it was punishment, accident, or pure sadistic cruelty, we'll never know for certain, but Epictetus's leg was broken so severely it never healed. He would limp for the rest of his life, a permanent reminder of his powerlessness. Most people would have been destroyed by this, broken in spirit as well as body, but something extraordinary happened instead. What he discovered in that moment of absolute physical helplessness would become the foundation of the most practical philosophy ever created. And here's the shocking part, it would make him more powerful than any emperor. Asterisk, 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 years later, when Epictetus finally gained his freedom and started teaching, he would say something that sounds almost impossible coming from someone who endured what he did. You are not your body and hairstyle, but your capacity for choosing well. If your choices are beautiful, you will be beautiful. Think about the radical nature of this statement. Here's a man who was literally owned, whose body was broken, telling us that our true self, our real power, exists in a realm that no one can touch. Not emperors, not masters, not circumstances. But here's where this gets controversial, and I know some of you will push back on this. Epictetus is arguing that most of our suffering comes from trying to control things we can't control. Your job, your relationships, your reputation, your health ultimately, these are not fully under your control. This sounds like victim blaming to modern ears, doesn't it? Tell that to someone who's been abused, who's faced systemic oppression, who's dealing with trauma. But wait, because Epictetus lived all of this. He was the victim, he was oppressed, he was traumatized. And he's not saying pain doesn't matter. He's making a much more sophisticated point. He's saying that our response to pain, that's where our freedom lies. That's the one territory that remains unconquerable, even when everything else is taken away. This wasn't just philosophy for Epictetus, this was survival. When you're powerless in every external way, you have two choices: despair or discover an internal form of power that no one can touch. Modern neuroscience, by the way, has actually proven this works, but that's not the most shocking part of his story. The most shocking part is what happened when Emperor Domitian decided philosophers were too dangerous and banished them all from Rome. Asterisk, 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 exiled to Nicopolis in Greece, Epictetus did something unprecedented. He opened a school. Not for the wealthy, not for the elite, though they came too, but for anyone seeking wisdom. And the words that came out of this crippled ex-slave's mouth would echo through eternity. Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants. Here's what makes this quote revolutionary, and here's where I'm going to make a statement that might anger some of you. Our consumer culture has made us spiritually weaker, than broken slave from 2000 years ago. Think about it. We live in unprecedented abundance, yet anxiety and depression rates are skyrocketing. We have more choices, more opportunities, more comfort than any humans in history, yet we're miserable. Why? Because we've been conditioned to believe that happiness comes from accumulation. More money, more likes, more achievements, more stuff. But every ancient wisdom tradition, not just Stoicism, tells us this is precisely backwards. Epictetus discovered something that modern psychology calls hedonic adaptation. We always adjust to our circumstances. The new house, the promotion, the relationship, the happiness boost is temporary. We're on a treadmill, always chasing the next thing. But here's the practical application that changed everything for his students, including some of the most powerful people in Rome. Instead of asking, "How can I get more?" start asking, "How can I need less?" Not in terms of living in poverty, but in terms of psychological dependence. When your sense of well-being doesn't depend on external circumstances aligning perfectly, you become antifragile. You become what Epictetus called invincible, not because nothing can hurt you, but because nothing can break your core. And this brings us to the most powerful lesson he taught, the one that would influence everyone from Marcus Aurelius to modern Navy SEAL. But there's something even more profound happening here, something that reveals the true genius of Epictetus. Picture the scene. Students from across the Roman Empire gather in Nicopolis. Senators sit next to merchants, freedmen next to slaves. Social hierarchies dissolve in the presence of wisdom. And Epictetus, this limping former slave, delivers the teaching that would echo through millennia. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, "I've heard this before," understand what he's really saying. This isn't positive thinking. This isn't just think happy thoughts. This is something far more radical. Epictetus is claiming that between any stimulus and your response, there's a gap. And in that gap lies your freedom, your power, your humanity. The slave masters could control his body, but they couldn't control his interpretation of what was happening to his body. Modern neuroscience calls this metacognition, thinking about thinking, the ability to observe your own mental processes. What Epictetus called the inner citadel, the unconquerable fortress of the mind. But here's where his teaching becomes almost mystical and why emperors would seek him out. He realized that most people are not free not because of external circumstances, but because they are enslaved by their own reactions. Their anger, their desires, their fears. You think you're free because you can vote, because you can travel, because you can choose your career. But are you free from the need for approval? Are you free from the fear of death? Are you free from the compulsion to check your phone every 5 minutes? Epictetus would say most of us are walking around in chains we can't even see. We're slaves to our impulses, our emotions, our conditioning. Real freedom, the kind that can't be taken away, only comes when you can observe these patterns without being controlled by them. And this is why his final teaching hits so hard. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Wait, that's not actually Epictetus, that's Eleanor Roosevelt paraphrasing him. But the idea is pure Stoic philosophy, and it reveals something profound. These ancient insights keep getting rediscovered because they're pointing to something timeless about human nature. What was Epictetus really teaching? That consciousness itself, your ability to be aware, to choose, to interpret meaning, that's the most powerful force in the universe. More powerful than emperors, more enduring than empires. So we return to where we started, that crippled slave shuffling through the corridors of power. But now you understand what those emperors saw in him. They had armies, wealth, the power of life and death over millions. But they were slaves to their fears, their desires, their need for control. Epictetus had nothing they possessed, yet possessed everything they lacked: internal freedom. Here's your challenge, and it's not easy. For the next week, pay attention to how much of your mental energy goes toward trying to control things you can't actually control. Other people's opinions, the past, the future. outcomes that depend on 100 variables beyond your influence. What would happen if you redirected that energy toward the one thing you can control: your response, your interpretation, your choices in this moment? Epictetus didn't just survive his circumstances, he transformed them into wisdom. He turned his powerlessness into the ultimate form of power. His chains became his liberation. Most people will spend their entire lives fighting battles they can never win, trying to control an uncontrollable world. They'll die frustrated, anxious, never understanding why they felt so powerless despite all their advantages. But a few will understand what that limping slave discovered in the depths of his suffering. True freedom isn't the absence of constraints. It's the presence of choice within any constraint.